Hello, good evening, everybody. Sorry, the micro. Okay, this is good. Okay, great. Ms. Lula Mula, President of the Society Women's Association of Kuwait. All members of the board here present. Natalia and Margarita, our writers coming here. Everybody present tonight with us. We are very honored, the Spanish Embassy, here to be at this society, at this association, opening this roundtable about women and literature with two new attractive voices of the Spanish literature. I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to Mrs. Mula and the whole board. From the very first moment, they have been very enthusiastically willing to participate and to collaborate and to help us to prepare this event. Thank you so much as well to her team at the association, which I know is doing a very important and outstanding work in favor of all women in Kuwait. Let me extend this appreciation to our staff at the embassy, in particular Guillermo, the DCM, Ms. Wafa, Bidan, Uman, somewhere over there, because they have been really multiplying themselves these days to be present in all the activities in the tight agenda that we have been preparing for the two Spanish writers these days in Kuwait. But let us first point out that it is in the framework of the 60th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Spain and Kuwait that both the Embassy of Spain in Kuwait and the Kuwaiti Embassy in Spain are intending, before the year comes to an end, to hallmark the significance of the bilateral links in different spheres, including, of course, the people-to-people relationship. Tonight's event is focused on literature, perhaps one of the best and long-lasting bridges between societies and cultures despite distance and time. In a steadily more liquid society, as the Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman defined our nowadays reality, literature represents, in a way, the soul of a nation, of a people, an effective tool to express and convey the deepest and more substantial permanent feelings beyond the immediate ones that are continuously circulating 24 hours a day by the various social media throughout the globe. As Miguel de Cervantes once stated, writing is the language of the soul. As an example of this strong power of literature throughout history, the works of the Andalusian writers, as Ibn Rushd or Ibn Khaldun, still connect all of us with the refined culture and transport us there of the Al-Andalus medieval times. The same as the works of Miguel de Cervantes, Lope de Vega, or Benito Pérez Galdós, to portray to the whole world the image of Spain in the 17th or the 19th century. But what about the current Spain and its contemporary writers, the ones thinking or expressing right now their feelings or perceptions of the world? Today, we are trying to open a small window to the thoughts and feelings, at least to the world of two young Spanish writers who have come to Kuwait and are here with us tonight. And thank you so much for being here. Margarita, Natalia, we know it wasn't really easy to travel amid these pandemic times. My first impression these days with the two writers invited tonight is that they have a very promising reality and future ahead. Their career is still in the making to a certain extent, but they have plenty of projects, reflections, and feelings to bring to our society. They have a very intimate literature showing very personal experiences that you will be able to appreciate very soon. I am sure their books and writings, as well as their personal experience as young, enthusiastic female writers, may offer you a new perspective about the current cultural scenario in Spain, and they may even inspire you, why not, to follow their footsteps and to plunge you in the fascinating adventure of writing yourselves as a way to share your own perspectives about the world we are living in. Both Margarita and Natalia have been brave enough to try to make it happen in their lives for the last few years. Last but not least, it is not by chance that we are here and the Women's Association of Kuwait, as our two guests are women. The Spanish government and our society are keen in promoting the role of women in all aspects of our lives. Margarita and Natalia are here for their excellent literature, but at the same time, it seems to us very interesting to think of them as well as two women of their generation in nowadays Spain. Their presence in Kuwait is an excellent occasion to open a fruitful and reaching dialogue with Kuwaiti women or from other nationalities residing here in this country. Many thanks again to all of you for accompanying us here tonight, and let me wish you an interesting, fun discussion.
Okay, so we will start with Natalia Cerezo. Is that correct?
Yeah,
So?
to my knowledge.
Same goes here. Okay. So she has a graduate diploma in language correction and support. She has taken 3 courses with reading reports for publishers, as she made also many publications, which is Rata, book series on Valentina too, and The Universe. So our first question is, tell us about your experience as a writer.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I am so grateful to be here and so honored. I was so happy to talk to so many different women these days. Okay, I'm not good with machines. Maybe it got fire or something.
No, don't worry.
It's okay?
Yeah,
Okay. Yesterday it was no good. At the university, I almost broke a laptop.
No.
Okay.
No worries.
So yeah, you're all great. Thanks for having me. About my experience, I think it started when I was pretty little with my grandmother. She used to tell me stories, and I used to listen to them, of course, because I was a good granddaughter. And that lit a spark. And I think it was the spark of reading. So I started reading a lot because my grandmother read a lot too. She was lucky enough to be one of the few women who got the chance to learn how to read and to write before the war. So she had this amazing and passionate love for literature that she passed to me, and I think it all started like that. So while I grew up, I realized there were some books that I liked more than others. A very dear teacher of mine showed me how to read and how to choose between good and bad literature. So I kept growing and writing, and until I made my first book, and then I made a second one. But I think the real valuable experience is not the publishing, but the journey you take into that.
That's completely true. And the same question goes to my fellow Neda Faris. Neda Faris earned her BA in Language and Literature from the Higher Diploma in Comparative Literature in Kuwait, Masters in Fine Arts, Creative Writing from Columbia University. Also, as well, she has published 3 books, if I'm not mistaken: Mischief Diary, Women of Kuwait, and Lucy and Vine Leaves Vintage. Neda also received the award on Arab Woman from Harvest Bazaar, Arabia, for her book in 2019 on impact on Kuwait women landscape. So, this is yours. Tell me, why did you want to be a writer in the first place?
Well, I also want to thank everyone for inviting me, thank my estimable colleagues. And I wrote some notes down because I have a tendency to ramble and wander, so I thought this way I can be more compact. So when I was 17 years old, I was in college and felt that so many of our political problems were due to limitations in the ways we think, express ourselves, and our capacity to imagine alternative solutions. Solutions that are beyond extreme binaries. And this led me to focus my energy on the literary sphere. I thought if I could nurture a generation of artists who would develop their thinking processes, get better, at expressing themselves without eliminating other ways of being in the process, and grow their capacity to imagine, to think outside the box, to see and conceptualize a future that they could then work toward. This new generation, with their creative gaze and their agency and desire to be impactful on a social level, would help tip the political pendulum on the side of diversity, tolerance, and compassion. So I wrote articles, poetry, and fiction. I performed for diverse audiences. I participated with and linked numerous organizations and groups together. And most important of all, I mentored, nurtured, fostered, helped writers improve their relationship to language, critical thinking, and creativity.
Wow.
Vote for me, that is it.
And we have Margarita Leoz. Okay, thank you very much. So she was born in Pamplona, Spain in 1980. She holds a degree in French language and literature from the University of Salamanca and literary theory with comparative literature from the University of Barcelona. She is the author of books of poetry and another short story collection as well. So tell us please about yourself. Why did you want to be a writer in the first place?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you to the embassy for the invitation. Well, this place, your country, is really inspiring. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to meet you and to visit your country and your culture. Well, in my case, when I was a teenager, I started reading a lot, everything. I was really bookworm. And I think that when you're a teenager, you need to express yourself. So I needed to express myself, and it was through literature, through this type of creativity, right? So I wanted to do the same as my favorite writers do. So I started writing. First of all, poetry. Then I combined poetry and short stories, and well, that's why I started writing, and then that's why I chose my studies, my literary studies.
Okay, and we have as well our dear friend Jameela Sayed Ali, a Kuwaiti writer and novelist, winner of the State of the Kuwait Award for Short Story in 2011. She has a master's in media and journalism from the University of North Texas, and she has a BA in media and journalism. Her books are The War of Flowers, The Circles That Do Not Rotate, Zero's Makeup Number, Sari, and Please Do What You Should Do in 2003. Please tell us more about yourself. Why did you want to be a writer in the first place?
Thank you, Sherifa. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for inviting us, especially the Women's Society and Ms. Lulu Al-Mulla and the Spanish Embassy for arranging this event. And it's my pleasure to be with those distinguished writers. And I would like to introduce myself as a writer. I started writing when I was maybe 13, 12. Around the teenagers' age, and it was published in a way in the newspapers by the help of my father, who admired my writings. And when I was 17, I wrote a complete novel for youth, of course, but I still treasure it. And I find it, wow, it was good for a 17 years old girl or writer. But my first book, a short stories book, published in 2003, and I received the State Award in 2011 for my second short stories book. I have 5 books, 3 of them short stories and 2 novels. All of them are fiction writing. This is my area. During my writing journey, I discussed most of the human needs. Of course, woman is human, and children and people in general, dealing with many aspects of life, including struggles to survive, and request of justice, work concern the status of women in the society, and intergenerational conflict. The stories also display romance challenges as well as horror and science fiction, highlighting disease, inventions, technology, and much more. Writing about all these subjects offered me self-fulfillment, joy, and a strong belief in my responsibility to say what other people cannot say, using my words, facts, and imagination to inspire the leaders.
Thank you very much. Well, that's a very interesting thing. So, I've heard from all of you, why would you want to be a writer? But the thing is, I mean, I seem to have this question. What did literature give you as a writer, and how did it enable you to connect with different cultures, or your culture in general? Anyone who would want to ask, please feel free. Anyone? Go ahead. Why would you want to connect with your culture?
Well, Jameela just mentioned this. Writing gives you capacity to perceive things that others might not be able to perceive, but also the ability to articulate them in a way that others might not be able to put them into words, phrase them, so that they can understand it themselves, but also share it with others. So that for me was one aspect of the writing that allowed me to connect with my culture, because suddenly I was able to see it from a position of a subject, an agent, someone who is proactive, someone who is living and breathing, not someone who is constantly the effect or the outcomes of what society has done to them. But for me, by far, the most important aspect of how being a writer allowed me to be a participant in my community is the fact that I was going to schools and meeting apathetic teenagers like 10 years ago and speaking to them about the importance of literature, about the importance of culture, and how community can change once we create different forms of belonging. And these same teenagers are now leaders in their own fields. They're the ones who are organizing events, they're the ones who are inviting others to talk about the importance of literature. They're going to schools themselves and meeting apathetic teenagers. So for me, on a literal level, it allowed me to think about society in a proactive way, but also on a practical level, it introduced me to society, made me see people and impact them on a more personal level.
Okay, that is very interesting. From the Spanish point of view, how do you guys perceive culture? Like, how did you connect with your culture through literature?
Well, I think for me it was more interesting connecting with other cultures, because I come from a very small town. It was very, was very hermetic place. So I think it was interesting how literature managed to take me to other places, to other cultures. That way, it can open your point of view. You will not be so closed. You will not be so focused on your living premises, you know.
So you were able to expand your horizons due to the fact that you read more, let's say, stories in a way?
I think so. And if you have a library near home, it's so cheap. You just have to go there and take a book, you know. It's like literature for me connects different things into one.
What is the most thing that you feel connected to with your culture and other cultures as well? What is the thing that actually connected your culture with other things?
I think it's
Is it the topics, the human side to it?
I don't mind if the other one talks about the topic I'm not used to, or I don't know. It's just empathy. It's just humans are feelings, so just connect with the other's feelings. We have like this base.
On the emotional level.
Yeah, I think when you connect in an emotional level with another author, no matter the culture he or she is, then
we're all the same note.
Yeah.
Jameela?
I believe that literature provides background of a human society in general. starting from the writings of the ancient civilization until today, and of course, forever. Literature is indeed an introduction to a new world of experience. As a Kuwaiti writer, I started, as I said, writing in a young age, but as I grow up, I started reading about my culture, about my pioneers in writings in both genders, and I found myself amazed with what I found in my history, and especially in this field. So the main important point for me to know that the first story in Kuwait was delivered to the readers in 1928 or 1929 by Khalid Al-Faraj. The story was the story entitled Munira, and it was about a woman, and it explains her suffering with the society. She lived struggling with a lot of challenges, and he wrote this story to make the society aware of the women position around this era. That was in the 20s, as I said, and the first writing for women in Kuwait was in the 50s. So I was very proud to know that the woman was in the men thinking and in the men words 30 years before they start writing, and I really appreciate their push for the woman to be in the front and to know about her situation and to discuss it in public. I also, when I started writing, I went to the Kuwait Writers Association, and I met with current writers from also both genders. I had the opportunity to be a board member since 2008 until 2021, and that was a great life experience for me to be with writers, with the poem, with thinkers from all generations, our pioneer and our current and our young writers. This made me feel literature is in good condition in Kuwait, and a lot of people concerned about it. And my wish is to be more and more in the future, and to write more about what we are struggling with and what we are hoping for.
The picture is never enough. But very good answer. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know if I am connecting with my culture while writing, because I think my culture is inside myself.
Okay.
I mean that I cannot be separated from my culture, from my identity. So I think that when I'm writing, my starting point is me. That the ending point is the others. So I think that we are connected with the others by writing, right? And I think that it's something maybe unconscious, the fact that you are writing and you are transmitting your culture in your writing. And this is my experience.
Okay. So, what are the topics that female writers bring on the table that were not previously there? Are there any similarities in both countries in your opinion? Anyone who wants to begin? Again? What are the topics that female writers bring on the table that were not previously there? Are there any similarities in both countries in your opinion? Let's say Spain and Kuwait. Are there any topics that
I wish I could give you an honest answer, but I haven't read any Kuwaiti authors.
Okay.
Well, actually on Monday, yeah, I think it was Monday, I learned about the Kuwaiti author, so when I get home I will buy the book, I promise.
Okay, based on the conversations you had with the locals and you met different people, how do you see it? Do you see any similarities in cultures, like in terms of topics or social?
Obviously there's always similarities, but there's always differences.
Okay.
It's just hard for me because for me it's literature, it's not such an abstract, yeah, it's like something, it's almost something you can touch. It's just telling a story. I don't dissect
There's no direct point to tell you
the
exactly
topics,
whether-
and I actually don't think that's the most important when you're reading, because I don't mind about the topics, I don't mind about the genre. I just want to have not a good time, but an experience that makes me grow. And I think that obviously in every book that it's good, it's going to make you grow. So maybe you can consider that a similarity.
Of course.
Well, it is true that at least, I don't know here, but at least in Spain, if you go to libraries, you will find a lot of books written by female writers, not only from now, but also from the past. I think it's tendency nowadays. And of course, I think there are topics that are very well and mostly written by, very well treated by women. I'm talking about motherhood. I mean, our experience as mothers. I think it's much more authentic, written by women than.
How's that? How is it more authentic than written by women?
Sorry?
How is it more authentic? Could you please elaborate on this point?
Well, because I think we are.
I don't mean by word, of course. What I'm saying is.
Well, I mean, of course, we can read this experience written by a man, but as a father, and it's perfect, but it's a totally different role. Well, when I personally read books written by female talking about motherhood, I think it's more authentic. It's close to their reality. Yeah.
Like Natalia, I think I can't speak to a comparison between the two cultures.
Okay.
Like Natalia, I think I can't speak to a comparison between the two cultures, but maybe if we talk about the kind of writing we do, then we can actually see how does it align, does it misalign. So for me, I don't approach my writing as, I'm a woman writing a woman narrative for women readers. Like that's not how that's not how I start. But in my writing for the past 10 years, there has been a project. There has been a consciousness coming to the work. And most importantly, I've been trying to examine the root of systemic violence in Kuwait and to see whether or not it is connected to gender violence or gender identification. The way that we talk about gender, the way that we either support or detract from certain gendered identities, is that somehow connected to systemic violence, corruption, and other forms of society? So that's basically been my approach, or how I entered into the quote-unquote gender conversation.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
No, but that's basically what I've been doing. I'd be interested to hear how others are approaching writing about gender and whether it matches or misaligns.
Okay, I agree with Nada that we can compare the two literature after we hear from them. So I will talk about women writings in Kuwait, if you don't mind. The main important thing, in my opinion, for the women to write about, who wrote about it in Kuwait, is the taboo. I mean writing about the unacceptable or forbidden social behavior in the country, because I personally believe that writers should be the voice for those who suffered in silence, either because they are young, weak, scared, sick, disabled, or forced to be silent. Women are more sympathetic towards victims of those taboo issues. And as writers, they are capable of exposing and discussing these subjects. A Kuwaiti female writer and very distinguished writer, Leila Al-Othman, she wrote in early 80s or late 70s about a disabled girl who married a young and healthy man, regardless her disability. And that was despite the disapproval of her society. She also wrote about domestic violence in her novel, The Silence of the Butterflies, in the 90s. And she discussed women abuse in some of her stories. Jameela wrote about children's sexual harassment in her novel, The Daughter of Maryam, in 2018. Butayna Isa wrote about kidnapping and rape of a boy in her novel, 2011, The Maps of the Lost. Jameela Sayed Ali wrote in her novel, The War of the Flowers, about the human trafficking, and that was in 2021. I believe this is what made the difference in the women writings in Kuwait.
I have some of the questions. What characteristics do you think distinguishes female writers?
We didn't hear from the Spanish. Sorry. I'd be interested to know how you guys write about gender in your work. The ambassador was saying that you guys are new voices, and it might be good for us to follow in their footsteps. So, I'd like to know, how do you approach gender in your writing?
So, well, as I have said, I think I approach gender from my personal point of view. I mean, sometimes you said, well, what's your perspective? Do you have a female perspective? I mean, yes, I'm a woman. I mean, I have, it's my perspective. It's natural. I mean, it's not something that I choose. I mean, I don't choose a female protagonist, for example, or
antagonist.
Yeah, that's it. So it's like that. Maybe it's.
It depends on the context.
Yeah, and the conflict you want to transmit, to communicate. But of course, I have a female perspective because I'm a woman. So maybe I'm more interested in some topics, not others. But in my case, yes, it's everything is personal. So everything comes out from me, like a woman. But it's not something conscious. So it's not I'm going to talk about it or on because I want to say that and that. But it appears.
Interesting. So we have, if any of the one of the audience would actually want to ask a question to the women writers. Anyone who is interested in asking?
Margarita, my question is, what do you think you want to reach your readers with? What is the topic right now that is in the forefront that you need to speak about? Because you're speaking through literature, through poetry. What is the issue or at present, the message you want to send across?
Today, you mean
in your writings?
In my writings,
yes.
Well,
can I add?
Yes, for sure.
Because you write poetry and fiction.
No, I wrote poetry. I'm not writing poetry anymore. I'm writing nowadays. I'm writing fiction and I'm writing non-fiction.
And fiction and non-fiction. Yeah. So then,
Prose.
in addition to the question, did your objective change when you changed the genres?
It's a good question. I'm going to start by the end. Yes, well, I think, no, not really, but I think my topics or my ideas, my issues, my conflicts, I love this word for what I'm writing because it's always a problem or a conflict that it's important for me when I'm starting writing. I think there are different ways of transmitting what you want to say. Genres helps you to help you a different genre. For example, poetry. When I wrote my first book of poetry, I needed to write poetry. I mean, the topic, which is my first book, is Penelope's Loom, El telar de Penelope in Spanish, and my main character was Penelope, the wife of Lysis in the Odyssey. So I don't know why, but well, it's true that I started writing poetry, but I needed to have a woman, the voice of a woman, for this purpose, and I needed poetry, I need poets for that. But it's true that when you grow up, you realize that when I grow up, as a writer, with maturity, I realized that I needed to change not only the topics, of course, because you are growing up and your conflicts change, but also the way of expressing my thoughts, my feelings. That's why I'm moving from poetry to fiction, and nowadays to non-fiction. For example, nowadays I'm writing a non-fiction book about the death of my father. So, of course, I couldn't avoid this topic because it was so present in my life. Of course, I didn't want to write about that. It's not easy. I mean, I prefer fiction. It's much more, I don't know, you feel safer when you are writing fiction in a way, non-fiction. But it was so, I couldn't avoid this subject, and I needed a non-fiction way of expressing myself.
There's a question.
I'm the founder of the Kuwait Community Lab. I know that two beautiful ladies, the Kuwaiti ladies, so I'm not asking them today. We have curiosity about you today, so I'll ask the other two beautiful ladies. Like when Sherifa, she asked about like the difference between the writings and for the woman today between the Spain and Kuwaiti. It was very difficult, and it was, I know Natalie, she said, honestly, I didn't write anything from, like, I don't necessarily Kuwaiti, but maybe from the Arabic novels and fictions, right? So I was wondering, because actually many get translated from the Spanish, like, fiction to the Kuwaiti, like to Arab languages, and the translation is really going around here for the fiction very, very and I would say in a booming way, okay? So we read a lot, like ours at home, like the old, the new, we have read a lot of stuff. So I was wondering about like the translation to from Arabic to Spanish language. Is there like people, are they want to read like Arabic fiction? Do they interest in like knowing what we do right?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of Arabic fiction. I think it's mostly Arabic fiction written in English, and especially not Arabic woman. And I think the problem is because the other, you know, what's not Anglo-Saxon, what's not European, it's harder to bring to Spain. It doesn't have as many readers. Also, it's more expensive to translate. So I think those are the main reasons to not have these, you know,
Translate.
huh?
Okay, I have this question. How would you actually analyze, or let's say the translation movement from Spanish to Arabic and vice versa? What is the dominant language in Spain at the moment that you guys have networks to translate from?
English. Without a doubt. English without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, I think translated from English into Spanish than Spanish books, than original books in Spanish. We have this huge Anglo-Saxon writing. Translated, yeah.
I think it's not only from countries. I mean,
From
Latin America, for
Chinese.
example. I mean, we share the same language with Colombia, with Argentina, and yes, big authors, of course, come to Spain, and we don't need to translate them. But we know very few authors from Latin America too, and it's really a pity because we have a great past in common, you know. So, well, it's symptomatic, I think.
Yeah, for my Latin American books, I have to go to a specialized library. Because if I go to a normal one, a regular one, most of the books, they will not be there because they are from really small publishing houses. And it's the same with Arabic countries, it's the same with Chinese countries, maybe Japanese and Korean countries, it's a little bit different because now are very into, you know, they're very popular now in Spain, thanks to manga and K-pop singers and stuff like that, but it really happens with everything, even with other European languages like, I don't know, Croatian, Greek. It's such a pity that we have this
Beautiful legacy or culture, but we're not.
Yeah, it's like,
It's not being translated really.
yeah, and also it's like, it's kind of like they give you the books they want you to read. Like,
It's more of a directed way of reading.
yeah, of course, Margarita and I will try to read everything that it's kind of different and that comes from small publishing houses, but most of the public just limits themselves to the bestsellers, like Dan Brown, all these huge names that you can compete against them, and that honestly they are not so good. And you know, it's really a pity, but the reader that reads other literatures is usually a very specialized reader. It's a person who likes to read, not a person who reads bestsellers.
Is it because of the access or not being able to actually know a language?
I don't know, I always thought it was because the people is lazy and just, you know, they really don't want to try new things. It's like my granddad never has pizza.
Really?
Yeah, really, and it's like, come on, Grandpa, let's have a pizza together. No, I don't want that strange things, he says. It's that kind of feeling, you know? People is lazy, don't want to try new stuff.
Okay, and to my fellow Kuwaitis, is it the same problem? Like, how would you actually, the translation movement from Arabic to English and vice versa?
So, sorry, remind me of your name? Hadir was saying that Arabs read everything, including Spanish, but I think you might be talking about a particular group of people who are already literary, already interested in it. But if you were to talk about the general Arab public, that's not true. Most Arabs in the Arab world aren't interested in literature.
I was speaking about the translation movement in the Arab countries. It's really going very, very well. And a lot of the publishing house currently, they even publish they are looking for like Indian, Korean, Philippine. They start to look
Spanish,
exactly. They start to look even for languages that really rare you can find the authors for. So I'm not talking about reading. I'm talking about the translation
The
movement.
publishers themselves are interested. I see.
I have a question to my fellow diplomats. Since we have many diplomats here, I'm really enjoying it. I have a question to my fellow diplomats. Okay, how would you actually speak about the cultural diplomacy in a way? How would the translation movement would actually help you in promoting the cultural diplomacy of your country? I mean, the question is yours, Your Excellency, so everyone wants to answer. And is there, of course.
Well, of course, it's fundamental. I mean, we are not translators.
No, you're.
But we are willing to offer and to raise awareness about what our culture can offer to the rest. So, of course, we know very good Spanish authors from our own region, my own city, but without translation, it will be very difficult to see those books in bookstores here in Kuwait, to find someone capable of reading them, of even getting in love with them. Translation is basic. It's true that it's something which is always in the backward, so we don't realize that everything needs to be translated, and how difficult the technique is to really transmit the very same feeling the Spanish author into Croatian, into Russian, Arabic. I mean, it's an art, it's a degree. Sometimes we are forced diplomats to translate many things. And we do it, it's more technical, more political, maybe more to the point we don't need to put a soul in our words because it's more, but of course, to translate a novel and poetry, to translate that requires a very skillful approach to it, which only a degree, only a master's can offer to you to really being able to really transmit this soul, this meaning from one language to the other. We can only try to raise this awareness. Maybe we have to target the translators so that, or the publishers, so that they realize there are these particular works, authors, which might be interested for the Arabic Kuwaiti audience. And yet there's a little bit of business. We cannot, no one is translating for free, whether there are someone who may translate for free and for fun. But of course, it's also a work, and it deserves to be paid, and to be paid needs to be sold. So
because Kuwait back in the 50s had and still have an Arabic magazine. It was more of the ambassador to the entire Arab world. I mean, countries back in the 50s and 40s, they thought them Kuwait. But let's say Al Arabi magazine actually helped in promoting Kuwait, and they used to have some translation. And we have the Kuwait National Arts Assembly. I mean, I don't know the exact name, but they used to translate, and they still translate as well. So, are there any forms of collaboration between, let's say, Spain and Kuwait in terms of the cultural diplomacy or the cultural exchange, and helping us understand each other more? I mean, just like the events that we're having here.
Nothing institutionalized, I mean, nothing established. It's just ad hoc, punctual activities that we want to organize. But at the same time, if there is nothing institutional, true, between national libraries, between the societies are connected to one another. And we've been surprised, Ambassador and myself, where we have visited some bookstores with a writer, for instance, yesterday, and we saw some Spanish authors, and I mean not only Cervantes and the classical one, which everybody knows, and which is a must in every bookstore to have El Quijote maybe. But we were able to find even contemporary authors which are well known, or even not so well known maybe in Spain. It means that it's something alive, that they don't even need the support of the government, of a minister, of an agency. No, here there are people who are into literature, into publishing, into translation, and who have developed this taste for good works, good authors, and they are capable of seeing beyond by themselves, not to be limited to Kuwait, the Gulf, Middle East, not even to Spain, and not to the most classical, basic ones, but to go beyond and to really work and to really check and to really read a lot to really find this precious gem that we can find between so many books, what is really interesting, what is really precious to be translated and to be popular and known here in Kuwait, for instance.
If I may, as well, I think we Arabs and Spaniards share a similar problem in terms of this translation issue, because we belong to worldwide, very widespread cultures. I mean, I've been serving as deputy head of mission in Panama for 4 years, and it is really, I mean, you live in a world of more than 400 million people communicating naturally in Spanish, thinking in Spanish, praying in Spanish, doing everything in Spanish. I think you Arabs have a similar issue, and that is a blessing in a way, and is bad in another, because you tend to be a bit more limited into the coordinates of your cultural background. And in terms of translation, I think we made an effort in the past to really do translation and cultural cooperation In the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, probably there was even more effort in terms of approaching the Arab world from the Spanish side. There was a lot of scholarships in countries like Jordan and Egypt. Really, there was a very targeted policy that led even to a lot of mixed marriages that I met, for example, when I was in Jordan or in Iraq a few years ago. It's not that this is not happening now, but my impression when I came here, as Guillermo was saying as well, that it's all about this a bit light perception of Spain, Marbella, or Mallorca, or Real Madrid, or Money Heist, or Casa de Papel. But it's true that if you ask the Spaniards, we don't really know much about Kuwait, or even the Arab world. We go to the topics, and this translation work is fundamental, is essential, but it's finally very limited to a very elite work and skilled people that are really interested. We know, we were trying to remember which Arab authors are well known in Spain, but it's really this Lebanese, in Malouf, or of course Mahfouz, the Egyptian. I'm sure there are many others that are translated, I'm sure, but we are not really capable of right now of remembering many names. No? You have the Nobel Prizes, you have Soyinka, the Nigerian, for example. I mean, he's a Nigerian, not an Arab, no? But it's because he's novel, or all these not very well-known writers that all of a sudden they are touched by the magic wand of an award, an international award, probably leading everyone, as Natalia was saying, you have to read this, no? Because they targeted that. And you read what they finally translate, and it's true that in Spain probably there are many more books in English than in any other language being translated right now, and it's really overwhelming. But I don't know, from the Arab perspective, what do you think that is really, I suppose, a similar point of view? No?
May I say something? Because I think it was Guillermo who said yesterday that the diplomats were trying to build bridges, but people have to cross them. I think their work is awesome. I mean, I am no one. I just written 2 books, and I'm sitting here talking to you guys, learning from you. It's so important, but if people doesn't read, it's all for nothing. So in the end, why is that? In Spain, to publish a book from another culture is more difficult than publishing a book that has been written in English. Because the culture is not so familiar. Yeah, sure, but because the people don't read it. So maybe we need more educated people, more people who know what a book is. It's not only paper, it's not only words.
Culture, it's the understanding of other cultures and trying to immerse.
It's having curiosity, it's just that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we take quiz
And I think even if we make a huge effort translating whatever, I studied Chinese some while ago. I don't know how to talk it anymore because I forget things so easily. But even if you do the effort, if you don't have the reader, no publishing house is going to publish that, even if you have it translated, even if they help you. So I think the problem is not us discussing here. The problem is all the people who is not here.
Exactly.
First of all, I would like to thank you very much for this enlightening discussion and giving me the chance to meet such prominent authors, Kuwaiti and Spanish. And I would like to wish you a very grateful future, inshallah. And referring back to your question about how diplomacy can, let's say, spread our culture. Actually, in my opinion, it's very important, and you can promote your diplomacy through the books and through culture and through such kind of events, because at the end of the day, diplomacy, it's not only about diplomats and ambassadors. Actually, it's a big and a huge work, and we have a lot of criteria for diplomacy, like public diplomacy, parliamentary diplomacy, our diplomacy, a lot of things. And actually, by focusing on translation for books and for the important books which you are keen to or depend on that books, on such kind of books, in promoting your country and promoting your culture is very important. That's why, in my opinion, we need to focus more on translation such days, because back in history, translation, yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And actually, at the end, I have one question for these prominent and distinguished authors. Where do you find yourself in 5 or 10 years, coming 10 years?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you. Where do you see yourself after 5, 10 years from now?
For myself, I hope I can write something that be noticeable globally, that's serving humans and making life much better. I didn't mean that our life now is bad, but we are looking forward to improve it, to give it a push towards globalization. And humans are sisters and brothers on earth, and we all need better life. We need cooperation together, and we need to work together to understand other languages and to be united. Not by saying speeches or something like that, it's just by working on it as a piece of art, with imagination, with fiction, and I hope to reach this point in a way.
Anyone who would like to add? Where do you see yourself 5, 10 years from now? Anyone?
I have a controversial intervention. I'm asking my Spanish colleagues, but also the diplomats, because this for me depends on where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years. What is censorship like in Spain, and where does it play a role in cultural diplomacy? Because I remember during the Cold War, the free democratic nations were trying to, the cultural diplomacy in those states were trying to push texts that critiqued the nation as a marker of, look, this is what free speech is, this is what free expression is. But in other parts of more closed, let's say, non-free states, cultural diplomacy dependent on, these are the works that reflect the position of the government of at the time, right? So like, is it open? And if it is open, yes, let's have more cultural diplomacy playing a role in spreading culture. And for me, where do I see myself in 5 to 10 years? I'm hoping we get to a point in Kuwait where censorship depletes, so that we can get to write the kinds of works that we want to, because the more authentic you are, the more people will connect with you. But the more that you're trying to position yourself in a way and always skirt around the issues, always unable to say the things that you want, then that doesn't create the kind of cultural awareness and cultural exception.
Interesting question. Our fellow diplomats?
I'm not a diplomat, so I'm just going to answer
Right,
the easy question.
More important.
Where I see myself in 5 years? I hope I'm not blind, so I can keep reading and writing. That I will be happy. Well, and my cats and the people I love to not die. That's it. So really easy. Margarita?
Well, I have never had this image in my brain, because I don't know, I have never imagined to be here 2 months ago. So for me, it's very difficult to imagine myself imagine to have published those books. I mean, something is new and changes every day, so well, I prefer not to think also, because yes, now maybe it's a dream, a broken dream, you know, so I prefer go day by day.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, so we have a question over here.
Hello, I'm Jameela Sayed Ali. I'm an Egyptian writer and translator. Thanks so much for Jameela to invite me to this nice event. And actually, my question is for Nada. Nada, I'm here for a long time in Kuwait, and I know most of the, like, we are the old generation. I would consider myself. My question for you actually is that I read about you and about the Anglo-Kuwaiti. So my question is, how you start your reading? Did you read Arabic before, or you just start to read only English because of your education? And are you as a Anglo-Kuwaiti writers? Did you read to the other Kuwaiti writers or the other Arab writers who, like me and Jameela, we just write in Arabic? The other thing, is there any communication, any like today, like you are with Spanish culture? So I'm really interested, like, to read to the others, and the most important question is, what's the differences you find between you and between the other Arab writers?
Who writes in Arabic?
Yes.
Yes. I wish our diplomats get a chance to answer that question, but yes, I am an Anglo-Kuwaiti writer. I learned my English in Kuwait. I didn't go abroad, I didn't learn it abroad, and I historicized the introduction of English in Kuwait as part of a national campaign. So, very good question. Did I start writing in English, or did I start writing in Arabic? And did I read in English before I read in Arabic, or vice versa? And the answer to that is going back to the censorship question. In Kuwait is a very, up until 2020, we had a censorship department in the Ministry of Culture. And books would be banned for one word. If there's one word that the censor at that point decided it defended his sensibilities, an entire book, let's say 300 pages of someone's heart and soul, this book would be banned for one word, which has nothing to do with the overall theme or the characterization or what this book is trying to say. So I grew up in an environment where the Arabic language was so policed and so connected to mythological labels and what you should and shouldn't do. But in Kuwait, English was seen as a language that wasn't a cultural language. It was the global commercial. Yes, like it's a global commercial language. It's the language of travel, it's the language of commerce, business, etc. However, because it wasn't as policed as the Arabic language, and you know, when I grew up, I was reading mostly books in English. And the more that I was reading in English, I noticed that my friends who were reading books in Arabic, who were not allowed to think outside of the box, I noticed that the way that we expressed ourselves, who we are as human beings, differed. Unlike them, I wasn't comfortable with a lot of the forms of diminishing the selves to fit in, for example. Lying about who I am and what I wanted to do. And so the kind of writing that I started to write was, it's local, it's homegrown, it's in English, but it's not commercial or secular. It's rather asking questions about identity and specifically about this form of censorship. Censorship that happens at the level, not just at the nation of politics, but happens at the level of culture, at the level of thinking, at the level of expressing yourself. So I hope that answers the question.
Excuse me, if you allow me, Nada, I will add something. Jihan, before we start this event, I was talking with Nada about the same subject, and she was wondering about the Kuwait Writers Association and why we refuse to give membership for the Kuwaiti writers in English. And I told her, and I'm telling everyone, I was working in this issue for more than maybe 7 or 8 years, because we have a lot of young writers from both genders in all kind of arts. They write in English, like their first language. And I suggested that we can accept them after, of course, we read their works. But we are still struggling with this issue, and I hope we will solve it soon, because they are a very important part of the society, and their number is growing, and we need to have them with us, to support them and to know about their thinkings and their writings.
I think it's about the idea of a language barrier, because if you go back to the educational system, it always brings you back to the language. Is how do we teach a language? Is it in a very creative, fun way by which you can connect with the culture and be a global citizen at the same time, or no? So it brings us back to, I think, our educational system and the way we translate.
We have a program for events, maybe once a week. We can do it twice a week, one for the English language and one for the Arabic language. And I'm sure we will have a lot of audience will attend both of them, because most of the people here speaking English.
Okay, Ustadha Sherifa, I can add something that I'm an Arabic teacher. I'm teaching in government school for young kids, but as a narrator, as a translator as well, so I can see how it's really difficult for the Arabic culture and the Arabic teacher that they are really still very traditional.
Yeah,
Still really, yeah, exactly. Like for example, for the creative writing, just yesterday I encouraged one of my kids to be out of everything, to just express herself and express her writing. And she was really very creative. I mean, instead of just write anything, it was about writing 5 sentences. She's 8 years old. It's about writing 5 sentences about one day at Friday morning. So what she wrote was like, it was an ordinary day, but then suddenly I saw a black hole, and I was inside the black hole, and there was a unicorn, and after a while I just woke up, and it was a nice dream. So I just gave her the full mark, because she's really creative, and I was so happy about it. But I know that my colleagues not doing the same. Maybe they don't even know about the black hole, for example. So we really need to work on it as well, for more creative programs at the schools.
Interesting. My questions to my fellow Spanish friends. Do you face the same issue in teaching Spanish? Like, is English now dominant in Spain other than, like, which language is the most dominant among the younger generations? Is it the Spanish or the English? From your perspective.
Well, the dominant language in Spain, of course, is Spanish. There are some other regional, national languages like Catalan, that Natalia can tell her experience perhaps, or the Euskera in Basque Country, but really the prevailing language is Spanish. The truth is that we are more and more studying English in all the schools, luckily enough, because the previous generation, even for ideological reasons, they studied other things, French, German, and very few really, the generation of my dad or my father. He did speak English, but it wasn't so common, and nowadays it's absolutely essential. If you want to do business, if you want to publish things, if you want to be read in science, I think Spanish is more and more widespread all over the world in science, in internet, in all kind of areas that before, of course, it was very difficult to have access. But in Spain, it's Spanish, it's Castilian, it's really the major, not English at all. No? And still many people don't even speak English in our country. I don't know if Natalia wants to say something about the. Yeah.
Sorry, is it because of globalization? So we have being local at the same time global. How global versus local could actually be coexistent together?
Of course, that's the way we all try to cope with. It's more and more difficult now with this Netflix and internet all the time really smashing us, and we are happily being smashed probably by that. But the truth is, you don't really have time with 24-hour a day noise or messages or things around you to really to think very much in many other things. No, it's difficult. But I think the literature in Spain and culture is very strong, and also in Latin America. I mean, we don't know many writers, perhaps. It's true that we all think of very quickly of Vargas Llosa or Garcia Marquez, or the very well-known Octavio Paz, which is a former generation. But right now, really, there is a strong number of writers all over, and I think they exchange with the Spanish, with some of the Spanish writers. Casa de America is in Madrid, is doing a fantastic job with that, and they try to. The problem is again the access to the big public, and that's also coming to the issue of censorship. I mean, sometimes it's not really the censorship in our countries, with the lack of interest of people. Used to say that just if you want to keep a secret, just publish it. No? I mean, joking, but the truth is, it's not always so easy to make the people interested, you know, in literature, in culture, and we belong to two very important cultures. That's really we are very lucky from that point of view. But we have to understand each other more. We have to cooperate more and to try to go beyond this overwhelming wave of big imposed. Interested. We don't say that it's not interesting, it's okay, but we have many more things to bring. And also concerning censorship, because apparently it's a very important issue here for you. I've been living in countries that is really would never be possible a discussion like this. Therefore, it's not that I'm going to say that everything is perfect, but of course it's not, perhaps, but nothing is perfect in our country. We all have our issues. It's true that you can say whatever nowadays in Spain, perhaps too much, we say too much, sometimes too much noise, too much people talking or writing or saying things, and we should think twice before talking. And in terms of censorship, I mean, it's all over the world. It's something we are not really in a moment that democracy or liberal values are in growing tendency, despite of these summits that we have been seeing recently. And it's not really a moment for liberal tendencies, but at the same time, we are connected, interconnected.
Diversity is the essence of life, and the more diversity, the better it is. Any remarks as well?
I like the last point about the individual entrepreneurial spirit. And that's what an artist is, right? Like we write because we have to. Part of us, inside of us, makes us feel like I need to write, I need to express myself. Mm-hmm. And then, sometimes we find an audience and sometimes not. But if our goal at some point is for more people to read and more people to connect, we just need to be smarter about what is available in terms of tools that help us connect and opportunities that show up.
Any final remarks before ending? Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank the Spanish Embassy, our fellow guest, and last but not least, Nobel, for helping me throughout the event as well, and for everyone who facilitated that. Thank you very much.